I'm gonna go and say it. Wow. Wow. um, so as you can tell by the title of the video, I just got through watching Kong Skull Island for the first time ever. And this movie was a lot better than I was expecting. Um, so I'm gonna go ahead and say this now. I am not a big MonsterVerse fan. Like, I like Godzilla, I love King Kong, but like, I never really got into those movies. I've seen the original stuff. I've seen the movie from I've seen bits and pieces of the movie from 2005. So I know enough about King Kong to like know the characters and know the stuff, but or at least know the character. Um, but I was not expecting what I didn't know. I went into this movie thinking like, okay, it's going to be a standard monster movie or whatnot, and go from there. Oh, it was completely different. It was a lot different than what I was expecting, but in a good way. So let's go ahead and start with the opening. Now, this is about a 2 hour long movie. The opening was really well done. Because it starts off during World War II, and you have two guys fighting because they get shot down, or one guy gets shot down, and he's trying to escape this place. But then obviously Kong shows up, and it's like, oh crap, and whatnot. So that was a really good opening. But there is one thing the movie doesn't really do, at least when I watched it. Now, this is only my first time ever watching it. I will watch it again at some point in the future because I really like this movie. I couldn't tell, I didn't realize that so many years passed between the opening and the rest of the movie until you meet a certain character later in the movie. It's like, oh, he was the guy from the beginning. Okay. Because I thought it was just, okay, well, they go from, this part, and then all of a sudden you're here, and no time has passed. I thought that's what it was. Or if it did take a time jump, I thought John Goodman's character was the one who, was trying to get on the island and whatnot. So, I thought that's where they were taking it, if there was a time jump in between it. I could be wrong. I didn't really see anything saying that there was a time jump, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't one. But man, like the second, it takes a little bit to get to the actual island. Like, it's a good about 20-30 minutes before you're actually on the island. But man, once you get on that island, shit happens. And it is freaking awesome. Because Kong does not show up in most of this movie, which is fine. CGI, budgetary restrictions, that's understandable. I can look past that stuff and stuff like that. Transformers do the same thing, at least Transformers, though they have actual Transformers on a lot of the time, versus King Kong only has like maybe 10, 20, 30 minutes throughout this entire movie. But that's all we need. Well, at least that's all I needed, because I like King Kong. I actually like King Kong better than Godzilla. So, hate me. I don't care. I personally like King Kong better than Godzilla. So anyway, there was just a whole bunch of characters, and 3 of which are MCU actors and actresses. Tom Hiddleston, who I did not realize was in good physical shape. I knew he was like in shape, but I didn't realize he was in shape. Brie Larson and Samuel L. Jackson himself, all 3 were present in this movie, and they are like the titular main characters, essentially. Samuel L. Jackson's character, I believe, was dealing with some form of PTSD, which unfortunately is a real thing that a lot of soldiers go through. But the way his character was just being portrayed on screen, it's like, okay, you are some kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator character, where you're like, if we can kill King Kong, we can be the masters of the world. Why? That was my only weird thing. Is like, okay, I get you're pissed that King Kong accidentally killed your men, but like at the same time, it's like you blew up his home essentially. Like, what did you expect? So that his character was kind of a weaker part, but he was still a very fun thing, especially since they were able to add one of my favorite Samuel L. Jackson quotes from Jurassic Park, "Hold on to your butts." I thought that was a beautiful way that they were able to pay tribute to Samuel L. Jackson and kind of already doing this, Jurassic style monster movie type thing. So I was, congratulations to the crew and team for that. Or if it was Samuel L. Jackson himself who wanted to do that, pat yourself on the back. Whoever was responsible for that. The action scenes in this movie I thought were really well done. When you actually do get action, there are some really cool moments where the soldiers and whatever are fighting these monsters, and then you have King Kong and they're throwing them and doing all kinds of stuff. The freaking helicopter scene though was just perfect. Because up until that point, I thought King Kong was a bad guy. Like, he was a good guy, but also a bad guy. So kind of like just doing his own thing. And then that scene alone, it's like, ooh, this guy is awesome. And then all of a sudden they later explain that he was actually saving these people, but because the soldiers blew up his home, literally, he was just defending his home. Which makes perfect sense. I'd be a little pissed too if somebody tried to do that to my own house. So, but the way the rest of the story plays out with, these soldiers just trying to literally survive this movie, it was just so fascinating. There's a scene where they find this gigantic spider-like thing. Oh, that was both creepy because I hate spiders. That is one of my biggest things is spiders. I do not like spiders. But the way that they make that scene play out, where it's this gigantic spider-like being with like some kind, it was just, I don't know. It was made of something weird. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. Bamboo. It was like a bamboo spider. So, but the way they introduced it was phenomenal. I'm somebody who used to be afraid of stuff like, blood, guts, and gore and whatnot. And then I started watching Dead Meat, and I was like, oh, blood and guts, who cares? On movies. Actual blood and guts, I can deal with blood on myself, and most of the time anybody else. Guts, no. That's when I'm out. But, like, the way that they introduced this gigantic, spider was just like, oh, that's kind of nasty, but that's also really cool. Like, that's literally what my expression was the whole time I was watching parts of this movie. I'm like, that is nasty, but wow, is that so cool. Show me more of this. Like, that's seriously what my feeling was the whole time I was watching the movie. And then, like, let's go ahead and talk about John Goodman. I think John Goodman is a really, really cool, good actor. I love him in Monsters, Inc. I do like him in some of the other movies and shows that he's been a part of. Because he just is such an amazing actor. And I really do like John Goodman in almost any movie he plays in. This one, he was actually kind of a bad guy in a way. Because, like, he sent an entire, like, squadron of people on this island pretty much to die. And I'm like, how can you be this obsessed with these creatures and whatnot to prove that they exist, that you're willing to sacrifice an entire team or an entire unit of soldiers to die just so you can prove, hey, guess what? These things are real. I'm not crazy. I'm like, how can you, like, consciously do that? And I know there's people out there who would probably disagree with me. It's like, oh yeah, well, it's for the greater of mankind or whatnot. And I understand it to that extent, but at the same time, it's like, how can you go about doing that? Like, I personally just don't see that. But then, like, but he also got one of the coolest deaths of that entire movie, where the freaking, I'm just going to call it a skull alligator because I don't remember exactly what they call it, but it, like, chomps down on the guy because he was trying to take a photo. The flash scared the thing. He's like, oh crap. And then just immediately gets bitten. I'm like, oh, that was gnarly, but man, did that hurt. Like, I can't tell you how many times I actually said that. Like, that's cool, but ow, does that hurt? Like I said, Tom Hiddleston was probably one of the best parts of this movie. I like Tom Hiddleston as an actor just because I like him as Loki. But man, he's just given so much stuff to do on this movie. And I remember I distinctly I didn't see his name in the credits for some reason. I wasn't really paying attention to the opening credits. But all of a sudden they go to the bar, and then you see Tom Hiddleston playing pool, and I'm like, is that Tom? Oh my God, it's Tom Hiddleston! Like, that's literally what I was like. And then all of a sudden I'm like, holy crap, he's pretty jacked. I did not realize Tom Hiddleston was that in shape. I knew he was a thinner person, but I did not expect him to be in shape. I'm like, wait a minute, you're Loki, the god of mischief. Half the time but then again, I remember, half the time he's wearing robes and stuff that covers his entire body. So it's like, he looks skinny, but he doesn't look, like he's built. So, and then Brie Larson's character had a lot of stuff to do. I know there's a bunch of people on the internet who do not like Brie Larson, and I think she gets so much hate for all the wrong reasons. Yes, I don't really like her as Captain Marvel. But in this particular movie, I think she was phenomenal. She, again, like Tom Hiddleston, was one of the better parts of this movie. Her character gets so much stuff to do. She doesn't come off as like being an overly, and really anything any different than just a camera person or whatnot, because that's essentially what her character is. She's taking photos of stuff so that way they can prove, hey, guess what? This guy's really telling the truth. This stuff is real. But like the way that the movie plays out with her just kind of being like, oh my God, and then like they meet, they meet the guy who crashed there and whatnot, and then the whole storyline that evolves from there, I thought was just really well done. And she is like one of the better parts of this movie. So. But like I said, I like Brie Larson as an actress. She gets so much hate on the internet for just being this uptight, snotty bitch. But I mean, yes, that's kind of how she acts. But that's also because she got the part of Captain Marvel, who's like one of the most powerful characters in Marvel Comics. So I can understand that. So I'm sorry, man. I don't know your actual name, but the actor who played Wreck-It Ralph is in this movie, and he is so awesome and funny in this movie. I remember I was watching the movie, and all of a sudden they showed him. I'm like, seriously, they have Wreck-It Ralph in this shit? It's like, and then he starts explaining who he is. I'm like, oh, he's the dude from the beginning. Okay, there was definitely some kind of time jump, and it was like 28 years or something like that. I'm like, if you're surviving on that island for 28 years with this tribe that's like worshiping King Kong, who don't speak, how do you understand them? But it's the good writing and stuff in the movie, or at least I thought it was good writing, that kind of like, okay, you can ignore that. They like him, he likes them, you go about your separate way. And speaking of which, this movie is a really sad movie in certain places, like when he finally leaves that tribe to finally go home, like the music and the looks on these villagers' faces just sells that moment. It's just like, oh, what a punch to the gut. And that's what you feel. That's what you feel when you watch that scene. It's like, oh, like, man, he's practically lived with these people for like 30 years. How can you just let that go? But, I mean, it had to happen because he gets one of the best scenes of the entire movie later. But, like, there's several moments where, like, the movie is trying to make you emotional. And I always commend movies who do that, because if a movie can successfully make me cry, it's a 10 out of 10 almost every time. Now, this movie did not make me cry. It almost did, though, at the very end of the movie, but we'll get to that in a minute. But, like, just the events and stuff that Wreck-It Ralph's character does, I'm sorry, I cannot remember his name off the top of my head, but the way he goes about doing his thing, and, you know, having the person who was fighting him at the beginning of the movie, having them become friends, eventually dying, and then he just takes his sword in honor of his friend, that to me just screams emotion and a very good, like, love-hate partnership type relation. Because these people were at war, they get stuck on this island, they try to work with each other, because they're like, well, shit, we're stuck, what do we do? They become friends, and unfortunately his friend ended up passing away, but he kept the sword and whatnot that he had, so that way, you know, one day hopefully he could escape Skull Island. But, like, you know, just the events that unfolded afterwards were like a whole bunch of soldiers were just getting picked off left and right by these skull alligator things, was just like, God, that is so gross, but so cool. And then towards the end of the movie, where like half the remaining cast members all are headed to the boat, they're all headed home, or trying to get home and whatnot, and the one guy who doesn't do much of anything throughout the movie says, you guys make it to the boat, I'll buy you some time while King Kong is getting back on his feet. And he freaking takes out the 2 grenades, and in slow motion is like, come eat me so I can blow your ass up. I'm like, oh man. Like, you know, he wasn't really a big character, but you still feel the emotion that's there, because again, they dial the music down, they play the scene in slow motion, they're trying to make you cry. It's the whole point of a scene like that, and I do respect the movie for doing that, even though it ends up being for nothing, because the giant alligator skull thing like smacks his tail, and then he just goes flying into a freaking mountaintop and exploding. That is one thing I will not credit this movie for. There are a ton of unnecessary slow motion shots, which do make the scene look really cool. Transformers is guilty of it too, I'll admit that. But there's just so many like weird, unnecessarily slow motion shots. But at the same time, to me, slow motion shots like that kind of enhance my viewing experience. So, like, it's not really a criticism, because I do like scenes and stuff like that that do unnecessarily slow motion shots, because, like, in Transformers, they use it all the time. You know, they're slow motion in almost every other shot, which, you know, yeah, it's kind of weird, but to me, for me at least, it enhances my viewing experience. But as a critical standpoint, yeah, there were a few too many slow motion shots that I didn't think were necessary. But for me personally, I thought they were okay. But then there's just like the overall, and the way that people get flung around like they're rag dolls, I thought was funny, because it makes sense and it doesn't make sense at the same time. Because yes, if you're fighting a being that big, yeah, you're gonna go flying around like a Raggedy Ann doll. But it's the same criticisms people had with Freddy vs. Jason. When Freddy is fighting Jason, you know, Jason's just throwing Freddy around like he's a rag doll, or anytime a character gets hit, they get flung like 20, 30 feet in the air and whatnot. And for that movie, I always said it's just Jason's strength, because Jason is a stronger being than Freddy Krueger. So in that regard, I can understand why they did that. In this, though, it makes 100% more sense, because these are gigantic animal-like monsters that smacking people around, yeah, you're gonna fly a few feet. But just the way that their bodies is like flying around like Raggedy Ann dolls is like, yeah, you can definitely tell that was a practical stunt, that they blew something up and had a stunt dummy in there to get flung around and stuff, because like legs and arms and stuff were bending all over the place. I'm like, that was definitely a prop dummy that got blown up. Which is fine. It's hysterical to see, because I know some of the behind the scenes stuff and movies and stuff like that. And it's funny to know that, and then see it on screen. It's like, oh, that's not how the human body actually bends. But let's get on to the ending of this movie, man, because like when Kong freaking saves Brie Larson's character from drowning, and the chaos that ensues, where he's like trying to freaking force open this skull alligator's thing's jaw in half or whatnot, and all of a sudden he thinks he's won, goes ahead and saves her, and then this thing wraps his tongue around Kong's hand that has Brie Larson in his hand, and he's like trying to swallow his arm. I'm like, oh, this is gonna hurt. Kong is gonna rip out his tongue, and this is gonna be so painful, but it's also gonna be really epic at the same time. I'm like, ugh. And all of a sudden he just freaking goes yank. He just like yanks out this thing's entire tongue, with holding Brie Larson, not managing to crush her. I'm like, oh, that hurts my tongue. That hurts my tongue just thinking about it. Like, ow, ow. And then like he's just like, okay, well, you're dead. You okay? There you go. Like that's. I'm like, ow. But then obviously the best part of this movie, at least for me, I thought was really well done, was the sentimental ending that they chose, where Wreck-It Ralph's character is reunited with his family after 28 years, and it's done in like almost like a camera photo shot, like old school, video camera stuff, which I respect. I'm glad that they did that. But just the way they do it and the way they frame it and the music that they do with it, I'm like, oh, this movie's gonna make me cry, but I'm not going to, because I can't cry during a movie. I cannot cry during a movie. Like, that's like one of the biggest things I always try not to do, is like, no matter how sad a movie gets, I always try to force myself not to cry, just because I don't like doing it. I do not like crying through a movie, because it's like, I know it's all fake, but at the same time, it's like, it's a really sad moment. But like, just the moment where his wife is like holding these dishes, and all of a sudden she just drops them because she recognizes who is standing at the door, thinking he was dead for 28 years. It's like, that is some emotional stuff, and I'm so glad that they did not kill Wreck-It Ralph's character off, because he was just by far, again, just like every other actor in this movie, he was one of the best parts of this movie. He was so funny. He was so, he was basically the guide of this entire group, and he was just so well used. And I'm like, please don't kill this guy off, because we need to see him get reunited with his family. And his son doesn't know who he is because he never met him, but the mom, his wife knew who he was right away. And as soon as she drops the thing, I'm like, oh, that, like, I actually know somebody who had something similar happen. They weren't gone near as long, but they were gone for a long time. And they got reunited with their families and whatnot. And it was the same experience. It's so heartbreaking to see that, especially when you know something like that has happened. But the movie does kind of play it off for laughs, where you just see him sitting on the couch, crossing his legs, and just watching a baseball game or something. I'm like, okay, that was a kind of great way to make that scene a little bit funnier, but at the same time, still pull at an emotional heartstring. Because, the actor who does play Wreck-It Ralph and this character in this movie, I'm sorry, again, I cannot remember his name off the top of my head, is a comedic actor. So, but all in all, I'm going to give Kong Skull Island, I'm going to give it a solid, and this is a rarity, 9.5 stars. Because this is such an amazing movie. I can understand why people wouldn't like it, because Kong really doesn't show up all that often. But then I remember the amount of visual effects and stuff that's in this movie, and be like, yeah, you want good special effects, it's going to be expensive. And the special effects and CGI in here were all but perfect. I will say, though, There are a couple of shots where you can like, okay, yeah, that was definitely green screen, that was definitely CGI background and whatnot, but I can look past that stuff. But there was one thing I could not look past, and it was very hard. It was very hard to accept it. Every single time they gave a close-up shot or whatever of Kong's face, and anytime they showed his face, his eyes looked weird. Because I don't know if it's because his eyes were bigger, because they say early on in the movie he's not his full size yet. So he still has a lot of room to grow. So maybe that's why. But his eyes just did not look right. And, you know, that's other than that, the rest of the CGI I thought was really well done. The special effects and practical effects were really well done, because there are a couple of practical effects in there. But just the overall eyes just did not work for me. I'm like, okay, that looks a little weird, but I'll let it slide. Because it was still fun to see King Kong beat up some creatures and stuff like that. I thought that was really cool. And then don't even get me started with the badass octopus scene. Because he just fights this octopus thing and just like freaking he's trying to choke him, and it's like he just straight up rips the arms off, and then like shoves the arms in his mouth and just starts eating this octopus thing while the tentacles are flopping everywhere. It's like, that's nasty, but that's really cool. Like, I can't tell you guys how many times I said that during this movie. So anyway, 10 at least a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 stars for me, because this was really well done. The casting was really well done. The story was really well done. The writing was really well done. The emotion was really well done. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that was really well done. Now, it does have its flaws, but every movie has its flaws. Even Avengers Endgame has its flaws, okay? We don't acknowledge the time travel logic that they put in there. We just accept it as being an awesome movie and then go from there, and that's it. So, it's not a perfect movie by any stretch of the word. There are some things that I was like, oh, I don't know why you would have done that. Oh, I don't know why you would have done that. But it's enjoyable enough to where, to me, it was enjoyable enough to where you're like, I don't care. I don't care. I just want to see a big-ass monkey beat up people and beat up big monster things. That's what I come here to see. That's what I came to see. I was treated to that. I had a good time. I don't need an explanation. So, anyway, let me know what you guys think of my review. If you guys like Kong Skull Island, let me know what you guys thought of it. Did you guys enjoy the movie? Did you hate the movie? Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys all later on Ultimate Deadpool. Peace out. You guys are awesome. Check in next time. We'll watch Godzilla versus King Kong. I'm hoping King Kong whoops Godzilla, even though I already know that's not the case. But one can still dream, right? One can still dream. But anyway, I'll catch you guys all next time. Peace out. You guys are awesome. I'll see you guys all later. Bye.